Spring has arrived. The bean trellis. I think I'm going to grow loofah sponges this year in this. This is how I catch the vole rats. We bait them with corn, catch them in a live trap, and then take them far out and let them go where they can live naturally and be controlled by natural predators. I tried a new experiment. I got these plastic bags for free in the trash at a candy factory, and I got these cattle tubs from a cattle rancher who throws them away and burns them, and they're working great. Just put the plastic bag over the top, and here you see my Chinese artichokes are already coming up. There's a spinach plant. There's a beet. There's some more beets. So it's working, and the lettuce is sprouting, all in just less than a few days. So much from a greenhouse. It works. Didn't have to pay anything for them, and save them from going to the landfill. Nice little greenhouse container gardens. Working good so far. Hey babies. The percherons. Hey percherons. How's my percherons? There's my percheron babies. Yes, they are. Good girls. Them's good girls. Them's good girls. Yeah. Are you a good girl too, Gwen? Good girl. She's a good girl. Yes, she is. Elaine? Enjoying your hay? You enjoying your hay? You coming over here? You good girl. You're such a good girl. Oh yes, she's such a good girl. You're such a good girl. Yeah. Daddy loves his baby. Spring is here, isn't it, Raj? Roger, come here, sit. Puppy. Sit, baby. Oh, you're too old to sit. The daffodils are blooming. And that's a Paulownia tomentosa empress tree. And it is going to bloom really nice this year. And the apples are not even blooming yet. There's a failed bat box. I'm just going to have to get rid of it. It's 5 years old and never had a bat in it. Just wasps every now and then. Here's the brand new orchard. Now, I have to be very careful what I plant because my animals always try to scratch on the trees and tear things down. So I just put some barbed wire in a long line and planted my apple trees on that. And other places where I have problems with them, like these pear trees, they're getting ready to bloom. I just put up some posts and put that on my trees, and that way with the barbed wire around there they don't scratch on them. And here's the garlic. It survived the whole winter outdoors. You can take it down in the single digits with no trouble. It's elephant garlic, and you can see I got a lot of it. We eat a lot of garlic, and it just grows here in the pasture, and you can easily plant it in the fall and it just keeps coming. This is what happens if you don't protect trees. This is my cherry tree, one of them, and this became a dancing tree for a horse, but it's still alive. It'll come up from these. But that's what happens there. I got to protect everything. And Roger, he protects the chickens. We don't have to kill any animals because Roger is a patrolman, and he watches things at night and runs them away and marks his territory. And everybody's scared of Roger. Ain't that right, Bertison? Roger Bert. There's my two pet goats. They've got about 3 acres of a long run they live in, and I take them for walks about every day. I already took them today. They have a little toy jolly ball. Here's some more garlic right there. This is how I protect my pecan trees. Here's a baby here, baby pecan. Posts and a strand of barbed wire. Loose enough to where if a horse gets in it, it will open up. More garlic. Got garlic all over the place. Here's my brand new orchard though. I already showed you. It's all the way down there. Here's my muscadines I've been pruning. It's a lot of work pruning these muscadines. You can see down there. There's where the beavers live. But anyway, this is part of my vineyard, muscadine vineyard. I've been doing some pruning today, but you can't tell. It takes a long time to prune them. And the clover's coming up good already, and it's about March 3rd. Here's what you want a muscadine to do. You want it to go left and right on a single wire. And I just use barbed wire now because it keeps the horses from pulling it down. And I use posts, metal posts that drive in. I used to use these wooden posts, but they all rot. Even the poison treated ones rot. They're not organic. Some honeysuckle. I gotta break that off. The goats love honeysuckle because it grows in the wintertime. And the bees like it because it makes really good nectar for them. This is how I tap the maple trees. And just put a 2-liter bottle on the spout there. Catch the syrup. But today I didn't do it. I need to re-drill the holes. The holes seal up after just a couple of weeks where I live. So you have to keep drilling new holes and they just keep sealing up. This is the yellow groove. There's bunches of birds in here. These are goji berries. There's 2 varieties of goji berries. This variety here is for the leaves more than the berry. There's more elephant garlic. It's all over the place. I got to really harvest that. And this is a little wildlife. The tree fell over, so the wildlife are living under it for the hibernating of winter, which is very necessary. If you don't have places for animals to hibernate on your land, you don't have a wildlife sanctuary, that's for sure. Here's the yellow groove. We're going to go through it. This is really the horses' barn. The horses, they've opened up the middle of this big forest. And inside here, there's cool darkness in the middle of summer. And they have sanctuary from the flies and the heat. It's nice and quiet. And you can see the birds. They like to sleep in all the boughs up in there because they stay green all winter. That's my puppy. He likes to pant. I guess you can hear the owl. The owl eats a lot of the voles that I relocate from the ones that overpopulate around my chicken feed. They eat the chicken feed at night and they end in the day, and they have a lot of babies over the winter. The voles do. And so the owls love voles. They're really good for eating voles. You can tell where an owl lives because it regurgitates owl bones where it perches. I think they call them owl pellets. More maple sapping places. This is a LeConte pear. It had fire blight pretty bad, quite a few years. But it got over it on its own. They usually always do, eventually. They get a big root system and they finally need more food than the soil can provide, and then they stop growing so vigorously, and then the fire blight dies off. Fire blight likes vigorous growth on a pear tree. This is a crabapple. The original mother of this crabapple I got from a lady that I did yard work for. She let me have one of the suckers that was coming up. I was going to mow. And her tree died of fire blight. And I think this tree did. But I've made a few suckers off of it, so it's not gone for sure. I got some more. You can see the Moso bamboo way over there. And it's greening up. The pastures are greening up. I don't have very much garlic out here. Here's a small amount of garlic. These are plum trees. Plums don't grow fruit where I live. They try to, but the fruit rots. It gets a brown bacterial spot that looks like a bruise. All the stone fruits except cherries do that, especially peaches here. Never had that problem before, but I've been here over 20 years. Never seen anyone grow good peaches here. Most people don't grow anything around here except ornamental flowers sometimes. Look at that, it's getting really green. I like seeing this. It's about time for some rain. This is a small pear tree. They got fire blight really bad. You need to watch what species, what variety of pear you buy, because some won't do well in your area, but will in others. Now this is a Orient pear, not to be confused with an Asian pear. The Orient pear is really doing well, but it has a pear that isn't very tender. It has like a potato, russet potato skin. It's not so tender. It's huge. Makes good juice. It's getting ready to bloom. This tree is at least 20 years. I planted it right away when I moved here. That's a wild plum. I leave it for the wildlife, and because the flowers smell like Hawaiian punch and the bees love them. I recently had to take the vines off of it. Here's a wine sap apple tree. It bared 2 apples last year, so this year it should bear pretty good. This is a bat coming up. That's a bat. My girlfriend brought that bat, and she stuck it on the wall of my house, and it's just been hanging around, eating bugs. Anyway, these Martin houses here, they're no good. This is a plastic type. Don't buy the plastic types because the interior is made out of the same kind of plastic they use for real estate signs. And in only a matter of a year or two, the plastic breaks down and shatters, and they don't have their own rooms anymore. That is just one hollow birdhouse, and the only thing that lives in that are wasps now. It's flimsy and no good. Get the aluminum ones. They last forever. They've gotten a very high price on those though. They've gotten so expensive. But martins need us. They need humans to make them nests. They have been living among people forever, and they eat horseflies, houseflies, and they're really good at getting Japanese beetles and other kinds of slow flying bugs, and they're just awesome to have around. But they take a lot of work. If you see a martin colony in somebody's yard, in their birdhouses, or around your neighborhood, somebody's doing a lot of work to keep them around. This is a cover crop garden that I just grew here because I'm planning on planting potatoes here pretty soon. Potatoes are great to plant out in the pasture because horses don't like the taste of potato leaves, and they're not going to dig them up. The same reason why the Irish started growing potatoes. The English army wasn't going to dig the potatoes out of the field like they did their wheat and their other grains that had to store out in bins. So they grew them potatoes under the ground, and we're pretty happy with that. Now up in the tree there's a bunch of cedar waxwings. That's a pecan tree with a broken branch. It's the second time the branch is broken. I've already cut one of them off. But what the cedar waxwings like are chinaberry trees. They eat the seeds that are still there on the chinaberries. We had a beautiful day today, but in just a couple of hours, the airplanes, as you can see these stripes, these so-called, looks like clouds, are actually from the airplanes. You can probably see the X, but they ruined our beautiful day. I tell you, I can't wait till the day when airplanes are electric and they don't pollute and they're lightweight. Because look at this trash in our air. It's garbage. It interferes with everything. It stops rain, destroys microbes. It's poisonous. It needs to get out of our atmosphere. It's blocking sunlight, which is causing major trouble. These are Warren pears. These two pears. Warren pears are probably my favorite pear. And this flock of cedar waxwings is still here in the tree. Maybe they recognize me because I filmed them last year. You know, birds migrate. They're coming to the same place. I really like cedar waxwings. They look neat. More pecans. These are hazelnuts. There's two kinds of hazelnuts here. There's a Papa James hazelnut, which gets real big, and there's a regular wild American hazelnut that I got from Burgess. The one in the middle that's got all the pollen hanging, that is the American one. And the one on the side here with mostly female receptacles, they are all the Papa James variety. And this tree with all its broken limbs at the top, this is a Ayer's pear. Ayer's pear. And that's an Oconee pecan. And it's wintertime. That's Huzu. A beautiful bamboo. It's really a good bamboo to have in Zone 7. Never comes up while it's still freezing. Here's the potato garden. These are some irrigation pipes. I have a good way of irrigating from my pond down there that I dug. But see these nice straight rows? Off here to the left, I've planted beets, spinach, lettuce, collards, and I think that's it. Beets, spinach, lettuce, collards. I guess that's all. And each where you see a deep row, that's going to be a row of potatoes. There's another deep furrow, row of potatoes. Deep furrow, but I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to cultivate one more time before I plant them. And I'm going to plant by the signs of the moon phase, because the moon phases have been planted by from time immortal. And I'm going to do it the same way they all do it. Over here along this cattle panel here, that's going to be tomatoes and cucumbers and things that need to climb up. That's what I plant there. And over here will be all the nice things that don't need to climb up, like the potatoes. So, and this is the pond. It's got salamanders, mostly. It's a salamander pond. That's what it is. And I irrigate from it in the summer when the salamanders have already gotten out and took to the woods. I think that's a Dawn redwood. Not really sure. It's got some really, really red bark. The tree is only about 12 years old. And it's huge for 12. Grows so fast. And here's a seriously affected fire blight tree. This was a variety that I shouldn't have planted in my area, because as you can see, it's extremely susceptible to fire blight. Most of it is completely dead, but you can see there's a few branches still alive, but barely. This little green supple branch is alive, and I'll probably just have to push this one over with my tractor. It's still alive. It's the worst one. Always remember to get the trees that are not susceptible to fire blight if you're prone to it. Places like California, they don't have a problem with fire blight because the air is perfect for growing things. It's not too humid or anything. I can see now this tree's not completely dead. It's gonna make it. It's even getting ready to bloom. So some of it down here will have to start over, but I'll just cut all the dead portion off the top. And the clover is really waking up. It's waking up. I'm really happy to see that. Spring has arrived. This is an Asian pear. There's the moon and the phase it's in. But anyway, this is an Asian pear, and it's got an apple-like pear. It's crispy and golden, and it's really delicious. This is the world's best bee plant, Vitex negundo, not Vitex agnus castus. And here are the seeds, and if you plant those, they grow more Vitex. And this is a basswood. They're good for bees, but not very long. For maybe a week, they provide a really pretty bloom. The best winter grass there is, fescue. This patch of grass has been green all winter. It can take the coldest temperatures. I really like fescue. I've never had any trouble with fescue. There's an American persimmon. I keep the limbs down there because it keeps the horses from dancing on it. They'll tear it up. But they come in male and female. So this is a female persimmon that will bear fruit. The males won't bear any fruit. And I don't have to have a male too close to it. I've got the males over there in those woods. And I had to completely get rid of my Chickasaw blackberries. By the way, this is one huge nutted pecan called a Mahan. It's only bared a couple of nuts, but they were huge. I think this is going to be the year where they bear a lot. Anyway, this right here was a huge, beautiful row of Chickasaw blackberries. But I had to mow it down because they never did well here. They never did well. One year they did really great, and that was the year before last. But the next year they all caught a disease and called blossom in rosella or something, rosette, blossom in rosette, and they died, so I just got rid of them. They weren't worth it. Just too much trouble. So much for them. But here I have some blackberries that I can rely on. Those are Himalayan blackberries, brought over from our famous Luther Burbank, the one who invented the russet potato. And so many other things, including the spineless prickly pear cactus. He brought that here. This blackberry. And it's really something. It's helped wildlife immensely. Its berries are delicious, and they are disease resistant. They're very berry flavored. That tree up there, that's an elm. And that's pollen from the elm that the bees are going crazy over today and for the last few weeks. It blooms even when it's freezing out. Elm is a good tree for bees. That's an American walnut. And there's a big old black oak tree with squirrel nests in it. I never cut oak trees because they provide so much for wildlife. The storm, we had a bad windstorm. It blew over a mess of trees, and I've been trying to burn them. Get rid of them. I'm going to bury those. This is the vineyard. I've got a lot of pruning to do and a lot of cleaning up. A lot of trimming underneath there to get rid of the blackberry vines and stuff. Wild blackberries that only have tiny little berries on them. Bunches of work. Bunches of work. That bluebird nest box over there, a friend made it for us. And every year, it certainly gets bluebirds. It really works. This is Moso bamboo, the hardest bamboo to grow in Zone 7. It's too cold here for it. Too cold. Has a really rough time. It comes up too early and it freezes. Always knock it back. This is a huge basswood tree. There's a huge oak. This is how I keep my tree frogs alive. Since we don't have lots of old dead crotched trees that collect water in them, we put buckets out, and I put water plants in the bucket in the summer that float, and tadpoles, tree tadpoles, lay eggs in here and hatch out. Then they hibernate underneath the logs and things that I leave laying around. I also make a few brush piles and feed spots for woodpeckers. There's a brush pile over there. And that's not for the frogs, that's for lizards and snakes and birds and hibernating creatures. Just saw a whole bunch of birds just fly into that brush pile. During the winter, I don't have to have an electric fence around the bees. These are some of my spare honey boxes that I keep under the tarp, and there's some right out there. But I had good success keeping the bees alive this year. You see that tarp down there, that thick tarp? That is to keep the hive beetles from being able to fall out of the hive, the larva, and be able to successfully pupate and become another beetle again and cause trouble. They have to crawl on that mat, and then while they crawl across that mat, there's all kinds of lizards here and birds that'll snatch them up, because hive beetle larvae look like worms, and they are delicious to birds and lizards. And so that's why I do that. And it's very cold now. It's about 40. And the bees are still out playing. Not much. But I checked on them today, and out of all these, I've only got about 1 or 2 that I'm questioning that haven't made it. So the whole row is doing pretty good. Pretty good. Now I keep this male mulberry here cut really low so I can catch swarms in it. And there's no truth about shade causing any trouble. Shade is good for bees. But the only problem with shade is it makes it hard to see your brood and to look at your hive inside very well when it's dark in the shade. And these are apple trees, more apple trees. I got 4 apple trees in this bee yard. I keep the bee yard fenced separately from all the other animals because I don't want them knocking my beehives over or taking a bite out of my lids. These are B-Max lids. They're very lightweight and they last a long time as long as a tree branch doesn't fall on them. I like to see the birds migrating around. Here's another one of my brush pile habitats. I stack the logs up from downed trees and let the types of vines that are going to grow on them. And this gives lizards and snakes and things a place to hibernate. Things like armadillos so they can eat the ants. It also gives a good place for carpenter ants to live, which are really good wood ants. We've lost a lot of varieties of wood ants because the people have cleaned up all the rotting wood. But wood ants aerate your soil, and a lot of animals need them. A lot of reptiles need wood ants to eat. Horses won't eat where they've gone to the bathroom. They go to the bathroom in the same spot if they can help it. And this really green area right here, this is the horse's outhouse, one of them. They have several outhouses, so to speak. And this henbit is a real early bloomer for the bees. It's just now starting to bloom here. This is a prickly pear cactus garden that I've just planted this winter. The horses are wreaking havoc on it right now. Sure doesn't look as good as it did when I first planted it, but don't worry, it's going to come out of it. It's going to come out of it really well. This is a flowering quince. It blooms super early, and a few hours ago the bees were all over this getting pollen and nectar. Of course, they were also all over this elm tree. This is what happens when you cut an elm tree down and you let it grow back up from this stump. It makes a whole bunch of little branches, and they weld themselves together at the bottom. They graft themselves together and become one big fat tree trunk. And see, here it's grafting itself together there. It's going to become one big fat tree trunk. And in another 3 years, no one's going to know that that's not one big old tree, because it's going to have one big trunk. I take advantage of falls like this, dead tree falls. This is kind of like a hugelkultur garden. I leave it here and I plant figs there and figs there, so that the horses don't step on them or dance over them. The trees help keep the figs warm. The logs help keep the figs warm over the winter, and of course it provides habitat for a bunch of animals. And I put this old steel cage around it, around the fig. Keeps the horses from messing with it even farther, even better. And this is a brush pile that I made. Brush piles are really something. You should make them, because animals, they do have to have a hibernation spot. And I made a second prickly pear garden, because the summers it doesn't rain for several months. Prickly pears don't mind that. And prickly pears, they put out a lot of nectar and pollen in their flowers, and you can squeeze the juice out of their fruit, and it's really good. I see I've got some serious horses messing with my cactus garden. Once this garden gets established though, which will be in a few months, I won't have any more trouble with the horses bothering it, because when cactus gets messed with too much, it puts out a bunch of spines. And you see right now, it's not got any spines because it hasn't been messed with where I had it before. And this all came from one cactus that I broke off and made new of. All it takes to reproduce a cactus is to simply break off a pad, dig a hole in the ground with a stick, take a pad and stick it in the ground right there and step on it. Yes, I run around barefoot. I'm not a redneck, but I guess I am a hillbilly. The reason I don't say I'm a redneck is because I've noticed that rednecks are never environmental. They hate trees, they hate the wilderness, they don't like the wilderness. They watch TV all the time, they eat meat, they kill all the animals they can see, they don't love wildlife, they try to talk stupid. I've been in the South all my life. I don't sound like I can't read and write, but it seems like the people that try to sound that way call themselves rednecks, and they're proud of it. I'm just a hillbilly because I want to keep the hills wild. I don't like to see it developing. I don't like to hurt wildlife. I want it to get better where I am. I want to make the land richer. I want the earth to be healthy. I like the way the wilderness is already. It doesn't need to be changed. And I believe, like most real hillbillies do, that we don't need to be out there killing animals, that hunting is not necessary whatsoever, especially since it's a new thing. Modern guns are new. Of course it's not necessary. The wilderness survived without us, and it does better without us. We shouldn't be out there killing it. It would be nice if people went out into the wilderness to help wilderness, like, you know, try to get rid of the useless dams that used to be built for certain purposes that they're not being used anymore for, so get rid of them. They stop the poor salmon from migrating. We should put dams on rivers that don't have migratory fish, places that they could use them better. Why not dam the daylights out of the Colorado River? Stuff like that, but leave it out of the Pacific Northwest. Man, this is another one. This is another pear. Forgot about, there's two pears. I'm so glad spring is here. Another pear. People should go in the forest to help it. We shouldn't go in the forest to kill creatures. That's just the wrong reason to be in the forest. If you got to bring a gun into the woods, you shouldn't be in the woods. Keep your guns in the city. You should defend yourself, yes, but you shouldn't go out there to offend innocent creatures. Anyway, enough of that. This is natural pruning of a pecan. Horses, they do this. They get over here in the summertime and they rub until they break the lower limbs off. As you can see, the lower limbs are dead. And this is what a woodpecker does. And It does no harm at all. The tree quickly seals itself up. But what it does do is it prevents a lot of auxins from going up. And auxins are hormones that stop a tree from fruiting or making nuts. And when the woodpecker does this, it slows the auxins down and actually helps the tree to start bearing. My horses are big and they can reach pretty high. So it's their own disadvantage that they do this, because what they do is they prune the branches up higher, and that way the fruit and the nuts are higher up where the horses can no longer reach them. If they didn't prune this, these trees would be bearing nuts this year, and these pear trees would be bearing nuts low. But what I do is I keep the barbed wire around it until they get about this size where they can't really harm them, and by then wild blackberries start growing around the base, and sometimes other kinds of briars, and so I let them grow kind of controlled, and they don't want to scratch on the trees anymore once those grow. So that's how I stop the horses from hurting my trees. When they're young though, I have to keep barbed wire and posts on them at all times. I'll show you. Here's a young pecan tree, and you can see the posts around it and the barbed wire, as I showed you before. The horses back up against this and they say, I don't want to scratch my butt on that anymore. I don't want to dance on that tree, and they leave it alone. In the meantime, here's a wild rose getting started with all of its thorns. And since the horses aren't able to dance on this, and I'm not going to be mowing around this post, the wild roses and stuff can grow here, and it becomes, I'll show you what it becomes. This is another pear tree. This is a Purdue pear from Louisiana. And you see these wild roses? This had a barrier around it too, but I took it down because, as you can see, no horse is going to want to scratch on that tree anymore because it's covered in wild roses. And I'll eventually dig some of these wild roses up and put them around my new orchard that you saw down over there when I first started the video. And then I'll be able to take that barbed wire and those posts off of those trees. And then of course, if I want to get rid of these wild roses, it's simply done by backing my tractor up next to the tree and mowing that. And then it becomes beautiful mulch for my tree. And every time it tries to grow back, it becomes more mulch. And here you have a tree with lots of stuff growing in it. This is a Warren pear, a baby Warren pear. No horse is going to hurt it because it also has wild roses. And these wild roses are beautiful in the spring. And yes, bees need them too. And all my fence lines, I keep them covered in hedges. Most Americans do not believe in keeping their fence lines covered in hedges, but it's the best thing because it helps to block traffic, because I have a 2-lane highway